Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you join us today in today's live lecture coming to you from Nkolo Mahadum Wisdom University. Today's date is Eke Market Day in the Igbo lunar calendar, and 9/18/2025 in the foreign Roman Catholic calendar. And remember, the reason we are giving you both calendars is for you to know that we Africans have a way of counting our days and months and years before the arrival of the colonial masters. And also remember that Nkolo Mahadum was primarily set up to encourage you to use your naturally given common sense, which we call akonuche in Igbo language, and also to decolonize your mind, to give the correct information from the misinformation, miseducation, and misdirection from our colonial masters. And that is why we package our lectures and deliver them from the standpoint, from the viewpoint of an Igbo man, of a Biafran, and an African. That is the way you should be seeing things. You see things from how they concern you, not how it concerns other cultures. That is why we always encourage you to please join us, subscribe, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. And now we are live on YouTube, we are live on Facebook, we are live on TikTok, and we are live on Twitter. So you don't have no reason not to benefit from this important lecture. And the title of today's lecture is Who is a Terrorist? We want you to know who is a terrorist. Anytime you hear this person is a terrorist, that person is a terrorist, who is a terrorist? And at the end of this lecture, you will understand and know how to identify the real terrorists. It is very, very, very important. That is why you don't have to miss this lecture. Share this lecture, like, comment, and share this lecture to your friends and well-wishers. And defining terrorists. We want to start by defining terrorists. According to Cambridge Dictionary, a terrorist is someone who uses violence, violent action or threats of violent action for political purposes. According to Cambridge Dictionary, a terrorist is someone who uses violent action or threats of violent action for political purposes. This definition actually fits the war in Iraq, the war in Libya, how they killed Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, how they killed Saddam Hussein of Iraq. Now you can know who is the terrorist from this definition by Cambridge Dictionary. According to Nkolo Mahadum, because we Africans have to also be defining things. We don't have to be following always the colonial master's definition. Nkolo Mahadum is defining a terrorist as someone that takes something from another person, either through deceit or violence, including their sponsors. According to Nkolo Mahadum Wisdom University, we are defining a terrorist as someone that takes something from another person, either through deceit, through trick, or violence, and their sponsors. All of them are the terrorists. So through the seeds can be the World Bank or IMF, that is International Monetary Fund, coming to African countries to sell loans to them that they know will not achieve the intended results. If you are coming from the World Bank and IMF loan, you package a loan that you know that is not going to be beneficial to African countries, and you come and you sell that loan to them, you deceive them, you lie to them, and sell that loan to them to keep them in debt. That is an act of terrorism. And if somebody brings a book like the Bible of lies, the storybook of Bible and lies, and try to convince you that that book will do anything for you, a book that they know cannot do nothing for you, that person is committing acts of terrorism. And then the violent one also includes like the Fulani terrorists rampaging all over Nigeria, and especially northern Nigeria. And the Syria leaders right now, the current leaders in Syria, they came to Syria through violence. They came and drove away the sitting government. And so many violent behaviors that you are witnessing across the world, including their sponsors. And we have to drive it home, because charity begins at home, to let you know that IPOB, Indigenous People of Biafra, is not a terrorist organization, because they are asking for self-determination by referendum to control their territory and resources. And self-determination is not a crime. It is enshrined in the UN Charter and African Charter. And most countries, including Nigeria, are signatories to those charters of self-determination. And it is self-determination that made Russia to intervene in their special military operation right now going on in Ukraine. Because those people in the Donbass region are asking for self-determination through referendum. So IPOB is not a terrorist organization, because they are asking for what belongs to them. They are not asking for what belongs to somebody else. We want to make it very, very, very clear to you that anytime you hear somebody calling another person a terrorist, find out what that person that calling a terrorist is trying to do. If it's a person fighting for what belongs to him, what legally belongs to him, he's not a terrorist. Rather, the other party, the outsider, the foreigner who is grabbing his thing, is the one that is the terrorist. That is one thing we want you to take away from this lecture. Anytime you hear somebody calling somebody a terrorist, don't rush to judgment. Do more investigation. Find out who is fighting for what, fighting for who. If that person is fighting for what belongs to him, like IPOB, fighting for what belongs to him, it's not a terrorist organization. Rather, it is those that are preventing IPOB. It is those that are exploiting the resources and controlling the land and people that doesn't belong to them. They are the real terrorists. Secondly, the leaders of the Alliance of Sahel States, General Assimi Goïta of Mali, General Abdurrahman of General Abdulrahman Tiani of Niger, and Captain Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso. These men that form the alliance of Sahel states are not terrorists because they are asking for what rightly belongs to them. They are asking, they are driving away foreigners so they can control their territory and control their natural resources. They are not terrorists. Rather, any country, anybody you see calling them terrorists is the real terrorist. That's what you have to know. When Idi Amin Dada of Uganda was living, the Western European countries were calling him terrorists, this, terrorists, that. Not knowing that Idi Amin Dada was fighting for the emancipation of African people. Once you're fighting for your own, you are not a terrorist. Those foreigners who are preventing you from getting what belongs to you, from taking charge of your own, are the terrorists. We also want to use this lecture to let you know that all African leaders killed by colonial masters, many of them, but we mentioned just a few. Patrice Lumumba of Congo, Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso, Muammar Gaddafi of Libya, Samora Machel of Mozambique, Amilcar Cabral of Guinea-Bissau, Agostinho Neto of Angola, etc. All these leaders killed by colonial masters are not terrorists. They are fighting for what belongs to them. Rather, the colonial masters that killed them are the real terrorists. They are the ones terrorizing our people. That is how you should understand who is a terrorist. Who is terrorizing who? Now, the Fulani bandits and terrorists that are currently terrorizing Nigeria started from Usman Dan Fodio. The jihad of Usman Dan Fodio in 1804. That was when it started. And it is still going on up to today, all over Nigeria, especially in northern Nigeria and in Biafra land. These are foreigners, these are the terrorists, because they don't have land in Nigeria. They are foreigners. They came into Nigeria and conquered the Hausa people and now extending their conquest to the south as promised them by Britain. They are the real terrorists. Foreigners preventing any ethnic group or culture from controlling their territory and resources, like Britain preventing the emancipation of the Biafran state and restoration of Biafra, and other foreign entities who are preventing Africans from being economically and politically and socially free. They are terrorists. They are the real terrorists. That is one thing we want you to know. And then, sponsors of terrorism are also terrorists, because you know that if you see somebody carrying a gun, somebody may have bought that gun for him or her. And so the sponsors are also terrorists. And you know that one Ben Ida of the Nigerian News published list of those financing terrorism in Nigeria. They included 9 people and 6 Bureau de Change. It doesn't end there. There's many of them, many of the Fulani elites in Nigeria, many of them, including Gumi, are all part and parcel of the sponsors of terrorism in Nigeria. And surprisingly, one time, a US congressman, Scott Perry, alleged that the USAID, always you hear United States Agency for International Development, USAID, funds Boko Haram with 697 million annually, yearly. United States agency is the one funding Boko Haram with 690, almost $700 million every year. And you can also assert this when the army commander in Nigeria, the army leader in Nigeria, Musa said that each time the NGOs visits the terrorists, when the army raid, they find them with loss of money and other things. And so the United States Agency for International Development was being used to sponsor terrorism in Nigeria and across Africa and other parts of the world. So now, who is the real terrorist? Use your tongue to count your teeth. Because if countries like United States using their USAID are funding terrorist organizations, can't you now then imply that United States also is a terrorist country, right? So that is why we want to present this lecture to you, for you to understand that anytime you are fighting for what belongs to you, you are not a terrorist. Rather, people who are branding you terrorists are the main terrorists. They are the one preventing you from getting or controlling what actually belongs to you. It is very important you understand it. And before we continue, I have to ask you again to please join us, subscribe, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and like, share, comment, so that we know how you're feeling. So what we promise you in this lecture is that after this lecture, you will know and understand who is the real terrorist. And our question is, who is a terrorist? And we are going by the Cambridge, according to the Cambridge Dictionary, they define a terrorist as someone who uses violent action or threats of violent action for political purposes. You know, the war in Iraq, they went there, they killed Saddam Hussein, they installed a puppet there. The war in Syria, they drove Assad out, they put their puppet, Giuliani. The war in Libya, they killed Muammar Gaddafi, and now they installed their puppet. This one meets the definition of the Cambridge Dictionary, because in these instances, they use violent action or threats of violent action for political purposes. But according to Nkola Mahadum, Wisdom University, because we have to start defining things our own way. We don't have to be following the colonial definition of things. So Nkola Mahadum Wisdom University is defining a terrorist as someone who takes something from another person, either through deceit, you are deceiving the person, or through violence, and then their sponsors. And we said that if International Monetary Fund and World Bank packages loan that they know will not achieve anything in Africa and sell it to African countries by lying to them, that's a form of terrorism. If you bring the Bible, which you know cannot do anything for anybody, and you start to use that Bible to say that Jesus or anybody in the Bible has power to do this and that, you are also a terrorist, because you are deceiving the people. You are lying to the people. And then if you are sponsoring terrorism, you're also a terrorist. That's what we want you to take away from this lecture. And we came back from home. Charity begins at home. So we use IPOB as a reference point to let you know that Indigenous People of Biafra, IPOB, is not a terrorist organization, because they are asking for self-determination through referendum in order to control their territory and natural resources. And self-determination is enshrined, is in the UN Charter, African Charter, and many African countries, including Nigeria, are signatories to those charters. And we also let you know that the war going on in Ukraine is because the Ukrainian government refused to provide referendum to the Donbass, Eastern Donbass people. And we are killing them, and we are stopping them from speaking Russian language. That was why Russia started the special military operation. And so fighting for what belongs to you is not, you are not a terrorist. It's not a crime. It is your right to control your territory and control your resources. And we went further to let you know that even the leaders of the Alliance of Sahel States, people like General Assimi Goïta of Mali, General Abdurrahman Tiani of Niger, and Captain Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso are not terrorists. Anybody telling you that they are terrorists are lying to you, because they are only asking that they have the right to control their territory and their natural resources, and driving away the foreigners, the foreign terrorists. That's what they are doing. And then we are expanded it to let you know that all the African leaders killed by colonial masters, all of them, there are many of them, but we will mention just a few of them to you. Patrice Lumumba of Congo, Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso, Muammar Gaddafi of Libya, Samora Michael of Mozambique, Amilcar Cabral of Guinea-Bissau, Agostinho Neto of Angola. There's a lot of them. All of them killed by the colonial masters are not terrorists. These are people who are fighting for the economic, social, and political emancipation of Africa, of their people. Instead, the colonial masters that killed them are the real terrorists. They are the terrorists. Anybody preventing you from controlling what belongs to you, what is legally yours, is a terrorist, and not you that is fighting for your own thing. And then we made it clear that the Fulani bandit terrorists who are terrorizing Nigeria now started from the terrorism of Usman Dan Fodio jihad, the jihad of Usman Dan Fodio that started in 1804, because he came from outside and then brainwashed the Hausa people and the Hausa people revolted against their kings, and he took over Hausa land. That jihad is still ongoing today all over Nigeria and in Biafra land. And these are the terrorists, not the Hausa people, not the Biafran people, not the African people. And Ben Eda of the Nigerian News published list of those sponsoring terrorism in Nigeria. 9 people. He mentioned 9 people, but we know there are more than that because many elites, including Gumi and so many religious leaders in the north, are backing, are supporting this Fulani jihadist terrorists. So he published 9 people plus 6 Bureau de Change as people sponsoring the terrorists. So all the sponsors of terrorists are also terrorists. And then US Congressman Scott Perry blew hot when he alleged that USAID, this USAID that Trump dissolved, was being used to fund Boko Haram, that they are spending almost $697 million annually, yearly, to fund Boko Haram. That is why those Boko Haram people have more sophisticated weapons than the African military, like Nigerian military. That is why they have both helicopters, they have a lot of weapons that even the country doesn't have, because they are being funded by USAID. So if that is the case, who is now the terrorist? Can't you conclude that even the American government is a terrorist? If you are funding a terrorist organization, you are also a terrorist. Because those terrorists on the ground are fighting for you, are fighting for your benefit, right? That is how you should see it. That is the way it is. Or you are a foreigner preventing somebody that has a legal right to something from getting that right. You are a foreigner like Britain and other people, other colonizers, stopping the Biafran restoration and the Biafran restoration. You are the terrorists. Once you leave your territory and you are sponsoring people in another man's territory to prevent the rightful emergence, the rightful control of things that belong to that person, you are a terrorist. That is the things we want you to know in this lecture. Anytime anybody calls somebody a terrorist, don't rush to judgment. Ask a question. What is he fighting for? Does what he's fighting for belong to him? Even Idi Amin Dada, in those days, they were calling him all kinds of names. We Africans didn't even know that he was fighting for the emancipation of Africa, for freedom of Africa, for economic freedom of Africa. Eventually, and so these are the things we want you to know. Before you make a judgment, try to understand what is actually going on. And each time you are fighting for what belongs to you, you are not a terrorist. The person preventing you from getting what belongs to you is the terrorist. That is what we want you to know. Take away from this lecture. And with this, we shall be bringing today's lecture to an end. But before we do, we have to advise all Africans again to stand up and remove the whole colonial boundaries we have in Africa. Because those are the sources of the poverty, the wars, the migration, the hatred, the tribalism, the killing in our land. Stand up. Because if we Africans cannot go to Europe and say, you are one country, you are one country, why should we continue to allow what they did in 1884 to 1885 to stand in our land up to today? Why we are killing ourselves and all those killings and lack of understanding, different cultures put together, like in Nigeria, nothing is moving. Why should we continue like that? And with this, we shall be bringing to this lecture. And thank you very much for joining me today, and have a very, very good day. Thank you, and have a good one. Bye-bye.